Hi, I am Samuel Telemac, Director of Possibility Ministry for the Inter-American Division. I am delighted to be here this morning with the Washington Conference and a special invitation extended to me by Larry Evans and Johannes. I am delighted to be with you today. In Inter-America, the Possibility Ministry has been exploding. We began the ministry and focus on persons who are deaf or persons who are hard of hearing. But since then, we have made our ministry all-inclusive. We use as our biblical reference Luke chapter 14. And in Luke chapter 14, we began to develop a very important theology about the ministry, Possibility Ministry. And that theology has influenced our thinking. So in Inter-America, we have been we moved from theology to practice. We allow God's thinking about Possibility Ministry to influence what we do and how we do it. And so in Inter-America, the deaf ministry specifically has been exploding. We have approximately 12 or 13, 15 churches, deaf churches, just dedicated solely, mainly to persons who are deaf. And it is growing in Inter-America. And so because of the explosion of the ministry in our division, I have been appointed specifically as Possibility Ministry Director. The first time we have done this in Inter-America, assigned someone specifically for Possibility Ministry. I have other assignments, but the administration, the executive committee assigned me specifically for this ministry because we want to give greater attention to persons who are deaf and persons with other disabilities or possibilities. So today I want to explore with you some important principles that will enable you to be an effective Possibility Ministry leader in your local church, in your conference, in your union. Leadership is key when you are implementing a new ministry. Leadership is key when there is stagnation in a ministry. Leadership is key when you have a vision for a ministry, but it's not going the way you would like it to go. So I want to share with you positive and practical ways to lead and to expand Possibility Ministry in your conference, in your local churches. So today, I want to begin here first with the belief assumption. If you're going to guide the Possibility Ministry in your union, then you need to shape their thinking. You need to change their thinking. And so you need to believe, here's some of the theological issues that you need to advocate. Do not begin first with practice. Move from theology to practice. That is a principle when you are guiding any new ministry. You need to move from theology to practice. What does God say about the ministry? And allow God's thinking about the ministry to influence the practice. This is very, very important to do. And so you need to guide leaders, administrators, pastors, workers to believe that all are gifted and all are treasured. That's very important. All are gifted, all are needed, all are treasured. It's the all-inclusive language, really, from the Bible. God's perspective about Possibility Ministry is an all-inclusive perspective. When he invited the servants to the supper, the servants gave many reasons why they should not, and they are not able to attend the supper. And then Jesus said to his other servant, go into the streets and invite the deaf, the lame, the blind, persons with physical disabilities, orphans, and all the other persons. Invite them to the supper. This metaphor illustrates that salvation is all-inclusive. God provides salvation. He likens salvation to a supper, to a lunch, to a breakfast, to dinner. He likens salvation. And so God provides salvation, which he likens as a dinner, as a supper. He provides salvation for everyone. No one is included. Salvation is a gift from God, and he invites everyone to participate in this very important supper of salvation. So salvation is for everyone. Therefore, possibility ministry must be all inclusive. All are gifted, all are treasured, all are needed. You need to see possibility ministry is for everyone. Acknowledge one commonality in humanity. There is one commonality with humanity. We are all equal. Why is there a commonality? We are all saved by grace through faith. We will all die. We have all sinned. And we all experience pain. That's a common humanity. That's very important in possibility ministry. When you are a leading person, they need to see that, so that there's no distinction between a person with possibility and a person, or put it another way, there's no distinction between a person with abilities and a person with disabilities. In the sight of God, we are all equal, all sinners, all in need of grace, all will be saved by grace through faith. We will all die. That's the common humanity. This is very, very important to establish important beliefs, important values. We need to also believe that God sees what every person can become. So we need to condition our members not to look at a person's disability as he is at the moment, but look at what the person can become in Christ. A typical example, when God looked at Moses, he saw what Moses could become. Moses thought about his disabilities, but God considered Moses' possibilities. Very, very, very important to help people to see possibility ministry from God's perspective and appreciate the different gifts in everyone. So that's theological assumptions that we need to advocate. Begin with that, share this. In Inter-America, we began with that to re-educate our administrators and our leaders about this particular assumption. And by changing their theological assumptions, changing their beliefs from the perspective of God, we're able to change their values and change their practices. Very, very important. In Barbados, for example, I think we have one of our workers from Barbados I see on the platform. And in Barbados, Barbados really had the first deaf ministry and first deaf church in Inter-America. We congratulate the leadership there in Barbados in the East Caribbean Conference, the Caribbean Union. But since then, the ministry have expanded. In Jamaica, we have 2 deaf churches. In Mexico, we have many new churches in El Salvador. All over Inter-America, new deaf churches just emerging, churches for persons who are deaf. And so, some of the characteristics of a person's engaging in possibility ministry is very important. A possibility ministry director is a unique person called by God. He needs to cultivate tolerance and dispel ignorance with relevant information. This is a very important point. A possibility ministry director, I'm speaking about the characteristics of a person who is working with deaf ministry or working with the blind or working with persons with physical disabilities. He needs to cultivate tolerance and dispel ignorance with relevant information. And this relevant information includes correct theological education to dispel ignorance. A lot of our members have some strange beliefs about persons with disabilities. Also, you need to be aware of the strength and your limitation. What are your strengths and what are your limitations? You may be working with persons who are deaf. You may have strength and you may have limitations. Also, you need to be apt to teach and to mentor others. Very, very important ministry. If you are working with persons with disabilities, you need to be willing to teach and willing to mentor others, take them under your leadership and give them opportunities to grow. Very important principle to do. That's one of my strengths as a leader, identifying emerging leaders, mentor them and give them opportunity to grow and to expand. Never afraid to share power. This is a very important principle to note. I want you to know that this principle. When you share power, you gain power. That's a rule. When you share power, you gain power. When you hold the power, you lose the power. So that a great leader is one who identifies emerging leaders and share responsibilities, share his authority with that person so that person can grow and develop. So another important characteristics of the leader is that you need to be aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. Just a second, my system you will have to edit this. And it has compassion and fosters passion for service to others. A possibility ministry direct leader has compassion and he fosters that passion for service to others. Appreciate differences and advocates a common vision. So in possibility ministry, you must appreciate the differences among people. They think differently, they act differently, but advocate a common vision. And this is important. A common vision is what will galvanize people to perform a particular task. So in Inter-America, we have a common vision for possibility ministry. We say that in God's kingdom, God's kingdom is all inclusive. That's the vision we advocate. God's kingdom is all inclusive. And we argue this vision from Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, where Jesus invited them to the supper, and some accepted, some rejected, but he went out and he invited the blind and the lame and so forth, that everybody came to the supper. So God's kingdom is all inclusive. That's our common vision. And we rally everybody around this so that nobody feels excluded, nobody feels exceptional. Everybody recognizes that we all have a common humanity and we are all saved by grace. And we ought not to look at people at what they are at the moment, but what they can become. Give priority to process thinking. Give priority to process thinking. Don't just think about an event. Look at the process. Think about the end first, and then work backwards towards the ultimate desired outcome. So engage in process thinking rather than just event thinking. Cultivate a growth mindset. Don't be stuck to just one way of doing death ministry. Be creative in your thinking. Continue to read and research and have a growth mindset to move from one particular pattern to a new pattern. Don't be set in your thinking, because this will kill the ministry. So have a growth mindset, which means that you're open to change, you're open to new dimensions, you're open to new perspectives for possibility ministry. In the context of COVID-19, the way we did death ministry in the last 10, 20 years certainly has to change, because it requires new mindset, it requires new skills, it requires new ways of reaching out to persons who are hard of hearing or persons who are deaf. This is a very, very important concept. Cultivate a growth mindset. Pioneer a movement among the persons who are deaf through integrative dialogue. What I mean by integrative dialogue, and consult with other persons. One person should not dominate the perspective or deaf ministry, but you need to cultivate, you need to interact with other persons, dialogue with other persons, and get different perspective. Integrative dialogue, what does that do? It builds confidence, it builds competence. It avoids you making mistakes, and it allows you to bring the resources and the skills of others to bear on a particular idea. And so if you want to be a great leader and you want to create a movement among persons who are deaf and grow the ministry in your local churches and in your conference and in your union, it's important to engage in integrative dialogue so that persons can engage and participate and bring their viewpoints and accept every view. It may not be in agreement with your view, but they may have a particular perspective. And always think from the perspective of persons who are deaf. Listen to persons who are deaf. Listen to their perspective. Work from their worldview, from their reality, not from your reality, but think from their reality. Think about what are the desired outcome, what are the issues, and when you try to think from their perspective, you'll be able to develop relevant strategies to meet their needs and to create a great movement among persons who are deaf, like we do in Inter-America. There's a great movement among persons who are deaf in Inter-America, in Mexico, in Panama, in Barbados, in the Caribbean regions, in Colombia, Venezuela. There's just a great movement. People are just excited about the ministry and they're participating in it. They're engaging persons who are deaf, and there's a movement because of integrative dialogue. Responsibility of possibility ministry directors. Okay, you need to advocate for a clear and distinct theology of possibility ministry. I'm talking about the responsibilities of the directors, the coordinators. You need to advocate a clear and distinct theology for possibility ministry. Every time you get an opportunity to speak at meetings, at board meetings, at conferences, before any meeting that you have, the first thing to begin with the Bible, open with the Bible and find one of the important assumptions and principles undergirding possibility ministry and advocate that principle, and then move to your practice, move to your agenda. Always move from theology to practice. One of the big problems we have, we focus a lot on the practice, on the events, on the things that we need to do, but we do not focus on the theology that influences that particular practice. So always move from theology to practice. In fact, I could give you a principle to follow, a pattern to follow when you for the ministry. Move from theology to principle, principle to value, value to methods. Very important. I say it again. When you're developing the ministry among persons who are deaf or any disabilities or possibility, always move from theology, God's thinking, then establish the principle, then establish the value, and then discuss the methods. Most times we will move straight to the methods and we ignore all the other things. And that's why the ministry does not grow in many places, because people are overburdened with just methodology, but they do not understand the theology behind the methodology. Neither do they understand the principle behind the methodology or the values behind the methodologies. And so they are not inspired or motivated. This is a rule. When you tell God's people what God says, when you tell them exactly, this is God's thinking about this particular ministry, this is God's thinking about this particular methodology, then the Holy Spirit puts in the minds of the members of your followers to obey and to do, because they hear God speaking. But if you begin only with the methodology, without the theology, then the Holy Spirit does not convict the member to do the particular practice. So always remember to begin with God. Show God's thinking about a particular value. Show God's thinking about a particular principle. Show God's thinking about a particular methodology. And the Holy Spirit will inspire them to want to do it. So that you must be an advocate for clear and distinct theology of possibility ministry. Increase awareness of the needs and the potentials of persons with possibilities, so that you help your advocate. You have maybe speaking about persons who are deaf, persons who are blind. You increase the awareness of the needs and the potentials of persons with possibilities. So how do you do that? You do that by selective exposure. Selective exposure is where you expose the leaders, the members, to persons with possibilities in Sabbath school, in divine service, at conventions. You give persons with possibilities, those who are deaf, those who are blind, those who are physical mobility issues. You give them opportunities to participate in the service or in the program or in the events, to use their gifts, to use their talents. And as you give them that selective exposure, you are desensitizing and you're changing the thinking of your leaders and of your members who have different false concept of persons with disabilities. And that will help to build awareness and change their thinking. So increase awareness of the needs and the potentials of persons with possibilities through selective exposure. Develop a new culture that every service you should have a person who is deaf participating in the service, either to pray or to read the scriptures through interpretation and so forth. Give them opportunities. Make your church, your congregation, all inclusive. Visibility in Inter-America, when we have major programs or any programs, prayer program, we invite persons who are deaf to participate. We invite interpreters to sign language. What are we doing? We are building awareness for the program. We're giving visibility to the program in the eyes of the leaders and to convince the leaders that this is important. Visibility is important. When you're moving a program, if you keep it in secret in a little private corner, it will not grow. You must always take opportunities in large programs and board meetings and in prayer programs to give visibility to persons with possibilities, so that leaders can see them, hear them, and be drawn to them, be moved by them. To me, the most powerful ministry in the church is possibility ministry. There is no other ministry in the church right now that can draw the heart of people towards the ministry. Possibility ministry takes hold of a human heart and draws out the affection towards God and towards persons with possibility. It's an exciting ministry, but you need to give it visibility. You need to bring it out into the open that everybody can see all of our members with different possibilities, the orphans, the blind, the deaf, the persons with mobility issues, persons with mental issues. Bring them out into the open, give them visibility so that we can draw out the affections of the members towards our members with possibilities and change their thinking and give our members with possibilities an opportunity to use their talents and gifts for God. Remember, every person with a disability has a unique talent God has given to that person to work. So give visibility to persons. This is a very, very important issue to do. Cultivate a holistic view of possibility ministry. This means do not just, even though you're working with persons who are deaf, you are coordinator or leaders of deaf ministry, do not only think about the deaf ministry. You need to be all inclusive. You need to integrate the ministry. You need to think about persons who are blind. You need to think about persons with mental impairment. You need to think about persons, the orphans. You need to be all inclusive. So have a holistic view of possibility ministries, because sometimes we are skewed only to persons who are deaf. I know the deaf culture is a unique culture. Persons who are deaf, they have a unique culture and a unique way of thinking and so forth. But in God's kingdom, when you think about it from the theology, the all-inclusive kingdom, the fact that salvation is available to all persons, we cannot skew the ministry to just one group of persons with disabilities or possibilities. We need to make it all-inclusive. In the General Conference, there are 7 groups of persons. We identify 7 different groups of persons with disabilities. You need to include all of them, make it all inclusive. And in that way, you will grow the ministry. In the Inter-American Division, we have established task force task force for each ministry. So right now we are preparing for the Orphans Day, which is on November the 20th. We're preparing for the Orphans Day, and we have the task force leaders. We have 24 unions in Inter-America, 24 unions. Each union has a task force leader for the different ministries. So we have a task force leader for the blind in each union. We have a task force leader for the deaf in each union. We have a task force leader for the orphans in each union. All 7 ministries, we have task force leaders for these ministries, so that each union has 7 task force leaders to govern the different ministries. And so all the task force leaders for the orphans, we come together each week, and we are planning for possibility for Orphans Day on November the 20th. This is very important. So even though you are the director of Possibility Ministry, identify the professionals in your conference, in your church, who are working among orphans, or persons who are working among the deaf, or persons who are working among the blind, or persons who are working among persons with physical disability. Those professionals who have the skills, who are practitioners in the work, bring them together and to discuss the issue and to plan the program. So they would plan it from the perspective of the persons with disabilities. And by empowering them, you're able to move the work forward. You're able to galvanize all the talents you have in your churches with possibilities. And this is very important. Think all inclusive in your planning. Convene consultation, congresses, seminars, and special days to increase awareness and acceptance of persons with possibilities. In Inter-America, I just cite in Inter-America, for example, but we have congresses, we have consultations, sometimes we bring all the entire division together for Congress, seminars, and whatever special days I just mentioned, November the 20th, and for us, April the 24th, or the 3rd Sabbath of April each year is a big day for Inter-America, where we bring all our members and leaders in Possibility Ministry, all the leadership together to celebrate and to advocate and to promote Possibility Ministry work, and to give persons with possibility visibility in the eyes of the entire Inter-American division. So this is very, very important. It's an exciting ministry. In fact, a person who is the Possibility Ministry director, listen to this, a person who is the Possibility Ministry director or coordinator, or participates in Possibility Ministry, the deaf ministry or the orphan ministry, God adds many years to your life, many years to your life. Persons who are working in Possibility Ministry, they live very, very long. During this pandemic, can you think of any person who are working in Possibility Ministry who died? Can you think of anyone? Think about it for a moment. Persons working with Possibility Ministry tend to live very, very long because they are happy, they are joyful. The joy that comes from the ministry, ignites their heart and their soul, and it strengthens their immune system, and they're able to withstand lots of viruses and lots of difficulties and enjoy life to the fullest. Possibility Ministry is God's ministry. It gives new life and energy to the people of God. So let's, okay, just give me a second here. I have a little problem. Yes, design attitudes or change attitudes towards persons with disabilities. It's a very important point. Change attitudes towards persons with disabilities. And how do you do that? You change attitudes through explanation of correct biblical principles. Change attitude by explaining biblical principles, clarify people's thinking and their theology about disabilities and persons with disabilities. Some people have thinking about you have a disability because of some sin that you have committed or your parents and what have you. You need to change their thinking through correct theology. Change their thinking. How do you change attitude again? You change attitude through participation. So if somebody has a misconception about persons who are deaf, you invite them to participate in a in a deaf ministry program and give them opportunities to serve the deaf or to do something for the deaf, to participate. In the participation, you change attitudes. Very, very, very important, okay? It's called selective exposure. Give them a selective exposure to the ministry which they have a misconception, and in that selective exposure, you're able to change their attitudes. So by engagement, you're moving from the affective to the cognitive. The problem is in the cognitive. The thinking is kind of skewed. And so you want to change your thinking. And so you engage them to do something, okay? And by engaging them in the psychomotor area, you're able to change their thinking. So you move from doing to thinking. They have a problem with thinking, so you engage them in doing. And by engaging them in doing, you change their thinking. Very, very powerful way of changing attitudes. Two ways of changing attitude: correct theological education, and second, engagement in the particular activity that they may have the misconception, to change their thinking. Design relevant and contextual strategy, possibility ministry strategy and plans from union and conference, and for your, well, I have your Inter-American division. So you must develop relevant and contextual strategy. So think about the ministry that you want to engage in. Think about the deaf ministry right now in the Washington Conference. What are the needs? What are the issues confronting them in this pandemic that did not confront them in the last 10, 20 years? And it is from their perspective, from the deaf ministry, persons who are deaf in the Washington Conference, you have to sit down and design relevant strategy based on their context, from the perspective. The strategy must emerge from the context, okay? Very important. The context determines the strategy. The strategy does not determine the context. The context determines the strategy. So the prevailing context of the persons who are deaf in the Washington Conference must determine the program, the strategy, the design. Whatever you do for persons who are deaf must emerge from the present realities, not from your realities just sitting in your church or in your desk and think, oh, I'm going to do this program. No. You must think about what are the prevailing realities. As Sister Joannis indicated, you had a consultation, discover the realities, and it was so private you could not record it. It is from that consultation that you had with them. It is from that consultation you sit down and develop new and relevant strategy that emerge from the perspective, and they will rally with it because they see that what you are developing, what you are recommending is coming from their perspective and is addressing the immediate realities. So this is what you call design relevant and contextual strategic ministries for your union and your conference based on the context that you are working with. Advocate and recommend relevant policy to facilitate changes in physical structures of your church building and school. This is something you're very strong in North America, but you need to begin to advocate for more changes in the church's structure to accommodate persons who are deaf, more equipment, more tools for persons who are deaf, so that they can participate in the service of the church, they can enjoy the services of the church, and they can contribute to the service of the church. So advocate and recommend for relevant policies to facilitate changes in the physical structure of the church. I have a few more minutes. Cultivate a holistic view of possibility ministry. This means, I gave you this one. Yeah. So this is some very important principles we wanted to share with you today about possibility ministry. And I want, just before I close, I want to show you, just to show you something else. So I'll come out from the screen, and I would go back here and do this. Let me just show you this here quickly so you can see. So can you see this? Let me make it a little bigger for you. Okay, so I want to show you this here. To show you that I'm not just speaking here from the top of my head, we sit down and we have designed a specific plan. This is a strategic plan for the Inter-American Division for Possibility Ministry in our entire division. We have approximately 4 million members, 24 unions, okay? And approximately 400 conferences and missions and so forth. So we plan. So you can see I have the plan here. You see the name of the initiatives, the objective of the initiative, the dates, the category, the persons collaborating with me, the KPI. So you can see weekend camps for the blind, Braille resources. You see, this is an all-inclusive strategy. Possibility Ministry Task Force leaders, and you can see everything here, what they are and the time frame and so forth. Projects of diffusion and awareness, how I diffuse the ideas and the concepts throughout the membership and through the churches. Special days like November the 20th and Possibility Ministry Days. Relevant policy changes in the Inter-American Division. IAD visual retreat for persons who are blind. We're going to have a virtual retreat for persons who are blind, and you can see the dates and everything here. Sign language projects to provide interpretation for persons who are deaf at all major events of IAD conferences and so forth. Festival of IAD festivals of interpreters. You can see this. You can see we have that already planned, February 2023, to provide an opportunity for interpreters to affirm, to learn, to encourage each other in the division-wide celebration. This is very important. Interpreters are wonderful people. The most dedicated people I have known, I know right now in the SDA church are interpreters. Interpreters are wonderful. They are always willing to work. They're willing to go beyond the call of duty. They're very enthusiastic about interpreting or signing for persons who are deaf. Very committed and dedicated worker. I really admire them, and to see them work among persons who are deaf. So we have enough. In Inter-America, we have lots of interpreters, and because we have many countries, they all have different codes, different sign languages. The Mexico Sign Language is different from the Barbados Sign Language, is different from Colombia Sign Language, and so it's sometimes confusing, but we find a way to coordinate it among them, and they're very enthusiastic and excited about it. So we're going to have the festival for them, and we would invite the North, we'll invite the West, the Washington Conference to join us on that occasion, Sister Johannes and the others, okay? And networking projects, that way we're networking among the different groups and so forth. And we have also to do research to find out how many blind persons do we have in Inter-America, how many deaf persons do we have in Inter-America, and how many persons with disabilities. That's research, so we know exactly what is the human capacity in each ministry. So this is our strategic plan in planning and coordinating for persons who are deaf. So do you have any questions? As you can see, I'm very enthusiastic and excited about it. It's something I enjoy doing. I love it. It's part of my life. I give my heart to persons with possibilities. And I think I see our sister Fraser here. You're from Barbados, Sister Fraser, are you?
Yes, please.
Okay, can you just briefly, I don't know if you said it already, but since you're on the platform, can you just tell us about something about the deaf ministry in Barbados, the church in Barbados?
Well, we have been working extensively with the deaf here in Barbados. We have a special program planned for next year, February, and we're about to prepare now for the launch. It will be done on the 2nd of October. So all the information about that special project for next year will be done for the launch. So we have other Caribbean islands that will be working along with us for this special project that we have for next year.
Good. Yes, and Pastor Hunt did call me about it, and I gave him the connection to integrate other persons, the Atlantic Caribbean, Jamaica, and other persons.
So they're all getting on board.
Excellent, very good. So that's integrating. Can you tell us exactly how many members we have right now in the deaf church?
In our deaf church, we have about 15, I would say about 15, and then we have others who come on from different times to visit. We have many that we are now trying to get back into the church.
Okay, lovely. And so we have about 15 there in the church, and it's a church is not only involved in Sabbath service, but it's involved in evangelism. It is involved in every aspect. Yeah.
Yes, please. We have, right now we have an elder in training. He is deaf. And we also have deaf in Sabbath school. I'm the head of the community services, and we have a deaf in that. So almost all the departments, we have active deaf who participate in AY, in the deacon, we have the deaconesses, we have them all over. So we're basically trying to prep them so that they can eventually take over the whole thing.
Very, very good. And go on.
Today in Barbados, actually, our deaf, they're in charge of the program today, but I decided to come here so that I can see what's happening. But the other interpreters are supporting the program that they have today.
Very, very good. And also we have in right now at Morelos University, we have a young man who is deaf, and he's studying for the ministry. He's graduating sometime next year in Morelos University, and will be our first deaf pastor in the Inter-American division. We have one in North American division, Pastor Jordan, but in Inter-America, we'll have our first deaf pastor. And that was breaking news for Inter-America.
Awesome.
In fact, the General Conference carried this news on its webpage and so forth. And it's very, very excited about what is happening in Inter-America. And I thank Pastor Brother Cumberbatch. He's the pioneer, he's the foundation man for the deaf ministry in Barbados. And certainly that's where I got my first glimpse and understanding of deaf ministry when I worked in Barbados. So we are very, very, very happy for this. And as I close, we are saying that in Jamaica right now, we have two churches for persons who are deaf, and it's growing. And just to close with this, there's a young lady, she's not deaf, but she began a ministry. She's a police officer. And she discovered as a police officer, she could not really reach the persons and understand the persons who are deaf in her community. So she went along and she learned to sign language. She learned how to interpret as a police officer. So she could work among the persons who are deaf in the city in Jamaica and to minister to them. And she did that, and she's doing a tremendous job. In fact, she developed a special project to help to build security for persons who are deaf, because persons who are deaf are sometimes abused and killed in that particular country. And so she developed a ministry where she can provide security for persons who are deaf, and she's able to interpret their language, interpret for them so they can understand, and to provide them with the kind of leadership and protection that they need in that particular country of Jamaica. So we want to thank you very much. May God richly bless the ministry there in the Washington Conference, and may this weekend be a weekend of transformation, where we transition from an old era into a new era, and may the work grow and expand throughout North America and throughout the world. God bless you.